In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. As we see sometimes on television commercials, and many times where we go to purchase something, maybe a larger ticket item than normal, there's this thing called Easy Pay, or you can have 3 easy payments, or you can afford something that's a larger ticket item spread over time by financing. And they say, we can make it easy. You can get into this vehicle, or you can buy this particular item by spreading the payments out and making it easy for yourself. In other words, affording something over time that you not necessarily would be able to afford in that moment. In fact, if you look at the desire and the banter that goes back and forth when the lottery or the Powerball goes up into the hundreds of millions of dollars and everyone starts speaking, did you hear it's 458 million, now it's 500 million, or whatever the case might be, and people are saying, well, I normally don't play, but I'm going to go play now. I'm going to try and make some what? Easy money. In fact, there's songs that have been written about making easy money, doing things that pay off big and quick, and we saw that easy money was made years ago in the dot-com phase when people got in up front and got out early and made millions and millions of dollars. And everyone in society, it seems these days, is looking for a way to make some type of easy money, trying to do the least and get the most. And I think even with our understanding of what we can afford as people has been personified in the fall of the housing market, as we see that people were buying houses that they couldn't afford, things that were beyond their means, but things that they wanted. Now, why do I bring this up about easy money? Because it's really a disposition of society today, to try and get more for less, to try and get as much as you can, when you can, and to do the least amount of effort and get the maximum amount of gain. What we see in the writings of the church is one particular story. And I wanted to share this with you. It's about this abbot of a monastery who takes his monks out who they were expecting this great grace to come upon them and this strength of that they read about in the Gospels, the strength of the saints of old and the saints of new. But they weren't really doing the work. So he took them on a little trip, and he said, let's go to the farmer down the way where he makes his wheat. Now, for those who know that in the early days of making wheat or getting the grain, it was a lot of work, and there was something called a threshing floor. And the floor was, they would take the grain, so you see the wheat grows up in as we would say, the sticks, right? You see the grains of sand that grow, or the wheat that grow up. They would take it, they would put it on the floor, and they would beat it with this chain. It's called a thresher. And they would take it and they would whip the grain, and what it would do is it would break it apart, and then they would sift it out, and the grains would stay, and the chaff would go into the fire. They would burn it. Now, Christ uses this reference over and over about, I am the winnowing fork going through and going through the grain. We will throw the chaff in the fire, but the grain that remains behind will be used for the good of people. So this abbot takes his monks into this farmer's threshing floor. So it's usually like a big wooden floor that sits in a barn, and they take loads of wheat and they throw it down, and the farmer would just sit and just beat the wheat, really. And then he would take it and sift it through, and it was a big process. The abbot walks into the farmer and he says, can I have some of the wheat when you're done threshing it? And the farmer says to him, he says, did you gather it? Did you grow it? Did you thresh it? Did you do it? And he says, no, not at all. But I would like the wheat. And he says, well, but you didn't do anything. So the abbot said, let me understand this. If I don't do the work, I shouldn't be entitled to the wheat. And the farmer said, yes. And the abbot turned around and took his monks back. And they said, well, what did you do that for? And he said, because if you don't do the work, you don't deserve the payoff. So what does that mean for us in our lives as Christians? We look at the saints and we say they're in a different category. We'll never get to that point. We'll never be embraced by God the way they were. They're special. They were born special. They were given gifts that were only indigenous to them. And we can't do it. And I hear this over and over, that the saints they're different, Father. I'm just me. And that's not the disposition that we should have. Not that we should walk around and say, I'm saintly and I'm holy and look at me, I'm walking on water and all these things. Not that at all. However, the graces that they received. What excludes us from receiving the graces of God and the grace of kindness, the grace of humility? Is humility something we work for, or is it a gift? St. Paisius would say, you can't just buy humility. It's given to you as a gift from God. So someone who's humble and says, I'm a humble person and I'm trying to be humble forget that. Humility is something that comes from God as a gift from God. But how do you get it? Well, the key of what I'm trying to get at today is that you have to do the work. No one can just walk into a store, get a cart full of groceries, go through the checkout, wave at the person at the checkout, and just go out to your car without doing anything. No one can go onto a car lot, grab a car key, put it in, and just take off. So why do we expect that not doing the work in our spiritual lives, that we should have these great rewards? Or why should we, even worse than that, say that we can't have these rewards because I'm not doing the work? And I think that's a key for us to switch our gears inside our minds and our hearts to say, I can get this embraced by God, but I have to do the work. And I can't say it's impossible, and I can't give myself a crazy load that will destroy me. As I said over and over through the years, a lot of times we see that men especially are trying to show off at the gym, right? They go to the gym and they're at the point where your tendons are, your rotator cuffs are just hanging on by a thread, and your spinal cord is just don't go crazy. And what do? They see their buddy there and they're like, yeah, I could lift that, and they go and then pop and then snap, and then their arm hangs down, and they're sitting there going, oh, I think I just blew my arm out. Why? Because they were trying to push themselves beyond something that they could actually do. We can't just go full throttle and say we're going to go full out on fasting. We're going to quit our job. We're going to pray. We're going to leave everything behind, and we're going to go and jump in fully, because we will drown. But what's the best way to exercise in today's day and age? The best way we hear from doctors is just get up and walk. Just move. You don't have to carry a ball and chain over your shoulder and swing it around in a circle and be able to bench press 800 pounds. Just get up and walk. And that in itself is therapeutic for our bodies. But when it comes to our spiritual lives, we think sometimes, we have to do way beyond what it is. But just pray. That's just the start. Just pray, and you will feel that door will open for you, and you will be able to embrace God and to move forward closer to God. And the graces that come from God won't be something that will be so far off and so distant. So how do we do this? We just do it. We just start. Today you're here because you're praying. But the key is to continue to pray throughout your week, throughout your days, and to ask God for His help. And not to expect that God is unreachable, or that we should be able to be miraculous, or we should have these great visions from God without doing just some of the work. And what's the easiest way that we can do that without breaking our backs and going off the deep end? Is just to start to pray and just add little things here and there. If you've ever seen a young, I always notice that sometimes when I baptize children, and I get some children who really, can put down food, or they're older, and I lift them up, and I'm like, oh, and I'm holding them up, and the godparents, sometimes they're so gentle with the oil, and they're like rubbing the oil like they're painting a Monet or something with oil with their fingers, and I'm like, hurry up, I'm hurting here. And this kid looks like the Michelin Man, and I'm holding it up, just shaking. And then you see the mother comes and grabs the kid and puts it and works the child like a football. Well, it wasn't always like that. Because what happened was they were little, and they grew a little bit bigger, and they grew a little bit bigger, and then the mother had the baby like this, and then in the car seat, and then you add the weight of the car seat, and then you got a bottle in there, and then you got a blanket in there, and the mother, by the end, has these biceps of steel. Because of what? Because she's toting this child around, and the child's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They don't notice, until somebody else grabs it. They're like, oh, you carry this baby around? And they're like, yeah, it's just the way it is. But how did it start that they were able to carry this weight in this larger form of weight? Was from a small child, and it was added to little by little by little, and then pretty soon they're stronger. Now I see a baby in the back, and I see the dad holding the baby, which is giving the mom a break, which is good for Sundays. And every time you can do that, you have a much happier marriage. But that's what we have to do with our spiritual lives. Start out small. What can we manage? And then just add little here and there, a little here and there. And then we will realize that the distance we feel God is at, that untouchable distance, He will come closer to us as we start to move closer to Him. And all He has to see is that we're just trying to move closer to Him, and He comes the gap. He closes that gap for us. And He said that over and over in the gospel. He shows that to us by the parable of the prodigal son. The prodigal son leaves, and the father is just looking out on his farm, waiting. And as soon as he sees, as the gospel says, he sees the son at a distance, he runs out to greet him. He runs the rest of the way and greets him. Now you can think of the son as probably just like drudging. He wasted all his money. He's been eating the food of pigs. He's been working these long hours. He's been living with the pigs. And he walks home dejected. My father's never going to love me again. He walks home probably with his head down, as we heard in the gospel reading this morning in Orthros, where the apostles were walking on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus walks next to them, and they're just downtrodden. They're dejected by the fact that Christ was crucified, and now they don't know where He is. But the key is Christ came up to them as they were sad. The father in the parable of the prodigal son looks out, and he sees the son and runs out to embrace him. So what makes us any different? Nothing. Nothing makes us any different. When you're sad, reach out to God. When you think that He's not going to cover the distance, just start walking to Him. Just being here, as St. John Chrysostom says, is the act of prayer. Just getting in your car, turning it on, wrestling with your kids to get them out, dressed and out the door, or whatever the case is, or just dealing with the fact of laying in bed and going, oh, it's Sunday morning, I got to go to church. As a parent, you sit up and you're trying to collect your bearings, and you're like, well, we got to go, I need to go. You did it. You're here. And St. John Chrysostom says that initial struggle is an act of prayer. That struggle just to get out the door, just to get your clothes on, just to collect your bearings, just to say, you know what, I'm going to delay what I have to do for the day until I go to church. That's an act of prayer. Continue that. Add little pieces here and there, and you will notice that the gap between God and you significantly closes, and the distance between us and the saints, and I don't mean our holiness and the saints' holiness, but our relationship with the saints becomes closer too. So continue to pray, add little by little, and you will realize that God will meet you not only halfway, but He will come almost all the way. As soon as we just make that first step back to Him, He will start approaching us in this very quick and very embracing manner. Amen.